So, a while ago, like, I think something like, 10 or 15 years ago, I used to follow this YouTuber, and he did these, like, lore breakdowns for video games, especially League of Legends. Like, he would do these breakdowns of the lore and the story and the character design. He'd talk about them, and, recently, I felt like I was in a really nostalgic mood. I felt like I really wanted to recapture the past, so I thought, hey, you know what? I always wanted to make videos like that. So, since he hasn't done it in 5 million years, why don't I take up that lost mantle and actually do a goddamn League of Legends lore video once again? And the lore video we're going to be doing today is With the Flowers by Matt Dunn. This is a short story, a fairly short one, in fact, about Zyra, building on her personality a little bit and making it a little bit clearer what kind of a character she really is and why you should consider her scary as hell, because, oh boy, this is a pretty short story, so we're going to be doing one of the rare full read-throughs. That is, we're going to go through the whole thing, I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to comment on it as we go, which is something I haven't done in a heck of a long time, so who knows, this could take an hour, so strap yourselves in. This is With the Flowers by Matt Dunn. And, well, before we get into it, one of the things I've always had a little bit of trouble with Zyra is that she was Poison Ivy, and that was kind of that. Like, she was a Poison Ivy ripoff, and she had this vague story-ish thing about how, this sorceress came to a jungle, and then Zyra was a plant in the jungle, but then she took over the sorceress's body, and then she went out into the world to... I don't know, it's never really been clear what her motivation is, what she wants, or indeed what kind of an effect she has on the world. It's never been clear, really, how we should read Zyra beyond she's a sexy plant lady who's definitely not Poison Ivy, despite looking exactly like her and having the same powers. So, With the Flowers, I think, tries to take a little bit of an aim at carving out a niche for Poison Ivy, I made the mistake there myself, for Zyra, that brings her a little bit away from the whole Poison Ivy eco-terrorism, environmentalism kind of thing, and explores a little bit more what exactly you get when you put the mind of a plant inside the body of a powerful sorcerer of some kind. So anyway, the actual story itself. The humidity of Tonica Market and the crowd's fragrant odor usually rushed buyers into hasty decisions, but Hatterley stood transfixed. Her eyes had fallen upon the strange, tangled bud encased with red, withered leaves, a specimen she'd never seen before. Specimen. My voice is weird today. You don't want that, the old florist said. It's a rare, night-blooming cycad, plucked from the southern jungles, where sunlight never touches the forest floor. It's more for potion brewers or alchemists. The merchant directed her gaze to a bouquet of sapphire roses. Now these are from far Ionia. Adapted them to our robust Comungra soil myself, or perhaps some pearls of the moon. Hatterley was not swayed. Sapphire roses and pearls of the moon flashed their colors for any eyes to see. This cycad held exotic potential, like the kraken lilies along the Serpentine Delta, or Parethan corpse tulips. Rare flowerings were precisely her and Casworth's type of indulgence. I'll take the cycad. So, this is something we've talked about with League of Legends lore before, is that it has a bit of a tendency to overload with terminology. Now, for the purpose of this discussion, what we need to know is that our main character, Hatterley, is someone who adores flowers, who cares about flowers, who is seduced by them. The seduction is kind of an important part of this particular story. And so, for me, it's like, it's fair to have the merchant mention, can I interest you in a sapphire rose or a pearl of the moon? Yeah. And it's fair to go, oh yeah, sapphire and roses and pearls of the moon flash their colors for anyone to see. But then, this little exchange here, this cycad held exotic potential like the kraken lilies along the Serpentine Delta, or Parethan corpse tulips. Now, kraken lilies and Parethan corpse tulips do not turn up again in this story. The Serpentine Delta is not important to the story, and none of those things have any context within the confines of the story itself. This is something we've talked about many times before, is that kind of world building is actually, it's a perfectly legit choice to make if you are world building for a connected larger world. Like if you're writing a novel, and eventually, or at some point during the story, your characters will come to the Serpentine Delta and see the kraken lilies, or the Parethan corpse tulips are going to turn up in a burial ritual someplace down the story, then it's okay to plant, it's okay to plant those concepts early on in order to build on them later. In a short story like this one, unfortunately, these are just names. These are just names of things, and the author uses them in order to tell you, hey, this is not just the short story, there's a big world out there, it has all kinds of cool stuff that we're not going to show you. We're just going to tell you that Kraken lilies, holy man, wow, Kraken lilies are so cool. They're rare flowerings, like they're super exotic and strange and super cool. Not going to show them to you, we're just going to tell you that they're there and they're awesome. That's kind of Perethian corpse tulips. Man, I could tell you things about Perethian corpse tulips all day. I could tell you cool stories involving Perethian corpse tulips. But we're not going to do that. And for me, which has always been the problem for League of Legends lore, is that when you are trying to just tell a short story, my opinion is and will always remain, and I'll probably complain about this until I die, that you should keep that kind of stuff out of it. You shouldn't sit there telling your audience like, oh man, the wider universe of League of Legends is so awesome, you guys. There's so much cool stuff that we haven't told you about, and we probably never will, and we'll never bring these things up again, and they won't be important, but we're going to tell you that they exist because we want to build the impression, the feeling, the implication that there is a really big, rich, detailed, fully formed, fully fledged League of Legends universe out there. And the thing that makes it galling isn't that they do it. The thing that makes it galling is that these things, they are references to nothing. Like, I read League of Legends lore pretty actively, and I don't remember Kraken lilies ever being relevant in another story. I don't remember Perethian corpse tulips ever turning up anywhere else, and they, like, might be a thing you could turn up in a Karthus story or something like that. They haven't been important anywhere else. As far as I know, they've never been mentioned anywhere else. And, okay, maybe this will be the first mention, and then they'll show up in a whole bunch of stories from then on, and then they will have some meaning, but right now they're just an empty set of words. They're just an empty set of terminologies. And by the way, did you remember that that's what most of these read-through videos tend to be? Like me reading a few paragraphs and then talking for twice as long about all the stuff I didn't like about them, or very specific nitpicks about story structure and how you use world building in a short story format? Well, this is what it is, so strap yourselves in. I'll take the psychic. The florist welcomed the gold pressed into his palm, despite the doubt scrawled across his face. He deftly cradled the bud in a nest of damp silk and planted the parcel into Hatterley's waiting hands. By the way, a little bit of credit to Matt Dunn. Planted the parcel into Hatterley's. Like, that's just good. Like, this is something I kind of like as a writer, is just that little stealth pun. It just kind of sneaks in there. You don't call attention to it. You don't go, plant it. See what I did there? You just use plant terminology when you can when you're talking about. That's just the little details that make writing fun for me. She noticed the aerial rootlets clinging to a shard of something hard and chalk white. What's this? Psychics cling to foreign objects, the merchant said. That one's grafted to a bit of bone. And this, by the way, good foreshadowing. That one is grafted to a bit of bone. Also, they cling to foreign objects, right? So it's setting up the dichotomy between the plant, which is not, a human being, doesn't have bones, it's not a vertebrate, and it sets up the death imagery. It's clinging to bone. The question you're supposed to ask there is, why? How did it get a hold of bone in the first place? Did it maybe kill the thing that the bones used to belong to? Like, that's really good foreshadowing. Again, without being too, blunt about it. But it's foreshadowing with imagery, which is good. Like, it's not a revolutionary thing, but it's just a good little detail. Casworth was bent over his antique desk, scribbling notes in the margins of his ledger by candlelight. He didn't look up until Hatterley set the ceramic upon his table. The strange psychid, half buried in a mound of wetted soil, already seemed happy, its reds and greens vibrant and slick with life. Oh, slick. Oh, it's a word like moist. It's like, oh, you shouldn't use it. It's just, for some reason, that just squicks me out. That's a very specific me complaint, and there's not actually a problem with the writing. A budding gift for a blooming businessman. She planted a kiss on Casworth's cheek, feeling clever. He smiled and turned to examine the specimen. When you said you needed flowers to brighten the place up, I assumed they'd be colorful. Casworth jabbed the plant with his quill. What is this, curious fellow? A most extravagant gift to celebrate the opening of the Upper Kumangra's newest trading supplier, Casworth Exotic Goods. Casworth pulled his wife onto his lap. Well, if you say this is a rarity indeed, then we are in for a treat. He kissed her sweetly. A single petal opened up, unfolding into the darkening room. It's beginning, Hatterley said. Will you be up all night? Most likely. There are still several invoices that need rubber stamping. The partners still have concerns about the shipping lanes. Hatterley yawned. Don't let me bore you, dear wife. Run along to bed. I'll wake you when it starts to flower. Thank you, sweet husband. So, this is sickly sweet. Like, this is just like, ugh, this is just disgustingly adorable. And like, oh, this happily loving wife and her husband, and they're in love, and they have a blooming new business, and the future is bright. I hope they die. Like, it's meant to be a little bit too saccharine, a little bit too nice, because it's setting up for, you know, everything to go wrong when Zyra actually turns up. Hatterly awoke to a creeping sensation on her ankle. Infernal skitter ants were everywhere near to the jungle. She kicked it away. Sleepily blinking, she turned to the empty pillow next to her. Casworth hadn't come to bed. The nagging insect was undaunted, and it was crawling further up her skin. She flung off the bed sheets and saw there was no insect, but rather a tendril vine weaving through her toes, entangling her ankle, and twining around her leg. Okay, yeah, just... the imagery of, like, a long vine snaking its way around a woman's body has been corrupted forever by certain kinds of media. Blah. Anyway, that's not the writer's fault. That's just me going, oh, maybe you shouldn't play to that kind of imagery, but yeah. Panic shoved sleep from her mind. She kicked but could not get the green and red shoots to release her leg. They tightened, biting into her flesh. She pried them off with her fingernails. Her hands bled from thorny splinters. And by the way, Matt Dunn is doing a very good job here of getting to the point. This is a simple 3-act structure. You have the intro. They oh, she gets the plant. It's a beautiful plant. I'll take it to my husband. Then we have the middle bit, where we're setting up for the tragedy that is yet to happen by establishing the loving relationship between the husband and wife. And then we have the third part, which is also the longest part, which is the conclusion, which is where everything goes straight to hell, and we get to the point of the story, which is to reintroduce Zyra. Like, structurally, this is just really... this is very lean. It doesn't really waste a lot of time. I know I spent a lot of time talking about don't use this extra terminology stuff like that, but, like, in general, this story is very lean. It's very well crafted. It doesn't waste a lot of time. It doesn't spend, like... because a writer who was... maybe a little bit too enamored of their own story, of the characters that they had invented, would probably have spent more time here in the middle, like establishing, oh, they had come to their home, this 4 weeks ago, and established their little company, and things were going well, and the wife was pregnant, and they were making friends, and they would have... It's tempting when you're writing a story like that to overload the middle, to make it sag a little bit. It's tempting when you're writing the introduction to a story like that to really, like, the humidity of the Tonica market and the crowd's fragrant odor usually rust buyers into hasty decisions. Boom. That's it. That's all we get to know about Tonica market, is that it's humid, and the crowd is kind of smelly, and people kind of want to get out of there quickly. We get the sense of the environment and the atmosphere like that, quickly. There's no time wasted. It doesn't waste our time, like, talking about the history of Tonica, and what kind of city is it, and where is it situated in the world, and what kind of trading routes are there, and who's ruling it, and what are the guards like, what are their uniforms like. It doesn't George R.R. Martin it's essentially. Which is, okay, that's not unfair criticism of the man. His writing is actually very good, but it's a short story. It has a point to make. It doesn't waste its time. And I really, really appreciate that. Like, when you're writing stuff like this short story with the flowers, it's already hard to ask an audience to give a damn about these short stories, because there isn't really a lot of storytelling inside League of Legends. Like, it's hard to establish that feeling of, oh man, I really want to know everything about these characters. And so I think it's a sensible decision when you're writing these short stories to have an economy of language, to get to the point, to not spend too much time trying to world build to the rest of the League of Legends universe, but to just tell the story that you're telling. And I wanted to bring that up because I did spend a lot of time talking about those damn flowers. But to say that, like, this is really... It respects its audience's time. It respects the fact that a lot of people don't know that much about League of Legends lore. Like, a lot of Rioters don't even know that much about League of Legends lore. And if you want them to care about it, you should tell a good story first. A good, interesting, scary story about a scary plant lady, and not try to give people a complete history of the entire world with every story that you put out, which is something Riot in general have been getting better at recently. We'll talk about that in future videos, I'm sure. Anyway, panic shoved sleep from her mind. Where were we? She kicked but could not get the green and red shoots to release her leg. They tightened, biting into her flesh. She pried them off with her fingernails. Her hands bled from thorny splinters. The snaking stalks wound a trail from under the bedchamber door, where they sprouted aerial rootlets to climb the bed frame. Her mind immediately flashed to Casworth. Armed with a flickering lantern and a pair of sewing shears, Hatterley followed the vines through the hallway of their manse. Manse being a mansion. Their circumference widened the closer she stepped towards its source, which she now saw was in Casworth's study. The door took several tries to open. Hatterley hadn't known what to expect, but it wasn't this. The room was covered, floor to ceiling, with floral growth. A riot of obscene colors, that's a good way to put it, danced in her lantern's flicker. Danced in the lantern light, I think would have been a better way to phrase that, but I'm just being an editor. Exotic bulbs dangled from the walls, their finger-like leaves undulating as if drawing breath. That's a good description. Flowers seemed to mock her through the darkness, flashing their rainbow petals like signal fires. All had sprouted from a singular dark nexus, an enormous closed flower bud which lay on the fainting couch by the fireplace, where Hatterley herself often read while Casworth worked. Here again, the story has just spent a whole bunch of time sort of establishing this horror scene of flowers, these blood red, writhing, undulating, pulsating flower vines just covering the whole study. And at that point, it's sensible to bring in this little detail. It's on the fainting couch by the fireplace where Hatterley herself often read while Casworth worked, because that reestablishes the thing like, this is home like idyll, this is their home, this is their house, this is where they live, this is where they love each other, this is where they had a life, to kind of reinforce the horror of the thing that has invaded, their lives. Again, that's, just solid craft, I think. Bits of ceramic and soil lay strewn about. The psychid had outgrown its habitat. All manners of protrusions crept from its pulsating petals. I like alliteration. Everything in Hatterley's mind screamed for her to flee her home, to put it to the torch, and burn that hideous bouquet. But not without Casworth. This, by the way, also, when you're writing horror and scary stories, it's important to remind the audience why the protagonist of the story doesn't just fuck off immediately. Just like, nope, not dealing with this, I'm just running away, and I'm calling the entire army, and we're setting everything on fire. You have to remind them why they're dumb enough to stick around. Vines twisted around the legs of the chair, the legs of the study table, the legs of her husband. Still sitting in his chair, Casworth was cocooned from head to toe by a writhing mass of leaves. Hatterley reached his side, bare feet slipping on the foliage underfoot. She cut frantically at the strangling vines, but each snip of the shears only made them tighten their grip and produced little thorns that pierced her and her husband. Blood trickled out. Where the blood drops landed, psychic blossoms burst forward to feed. Hatterley freed one of Casworth's hands. It was pale and cold to the touch. A stench filled the air like a rotting corpse. With tears in her eyes, she turned her head towards the fainting couch where the psychic bud was flowering. The stench grew worse. Hatterley retched. The gargantuan petals peeled backward in colorful layers, revealing oblong petals of striking scarlet and deep green, garlanded in black tips, revealing a woman in place of the stamen. Here again, very good use of language. Because what we get here, gargantuan petals peeled backwards in colorful layers, revealing oblong petals of a striking scarlet and a deep green, garlanded in black tips. The language here that's being used is literally flowery, right? But it's the kind of language you would use if you were to describe like a really epic night at the theater, as the curtain is drawn from the stage and like these gorgeous heavy curtains like part to their ways and reveal greater colors beneath them, finally revealing the star of the show. A woman in place of the stamen. Like, that's a good way to build the momentum to the reveal of Zyra. I also like, again, a little bit of a botanical reference, the reference to corpse flowers. Corpse flowers, also known as, they have a name that I keep forgetting. They're an enemy, Rafflesia are an enemy in Final Fantasy games, that's why I remember the name. Are legendary for smelling like corpses, and using that smell of a corpse as a lure to attract pollinators, to attract, living things that will help the flower perpetuate itself. Which again is a good reference because Zyra here is literally using a lure to attract more food, specifically Hatterley. So like, it's just, again, thematically it's really, really nicely done that you have both like a natural progression whereby Zyra uses Hatterley's husband Casworth as food in order to generate a body for herself, but also that thematically speaking, she's doing what a predatory plant does. She's luring in new prey and consuming them by tempting them with something that they desire, in this case, Hatterley with her husband. Very well done. Let's see. Revealing a woman in place of the statement. Her hair was red as blood, her flesh like leaves. Vines and petals wreathed her in deadly beauty. Her eyes opened. They reminded Hatterley of a panther's, narrow irises seeing only prey. The woman who blossomed from the flower arose. Hatterley clutched the shears like a dagger. "You wish to prune me already?" the thing said, its deep voice ensnaring Hatterley. "What are you?" "The bloom you longed to witness." The stench turned. Gone was the reek of death. Hatterley inhaled sweet fragrances, orange blossoms, the aroma of sapphire roses, the fruity scent of kraken lilies, the musk of pearls of the moon, the delicate hints of wisteria. There were more secret flowers, but she somehow knew their names. They smelled of colors her eyes never saw. A name formed in Hatterley's mind. Zyra. "Thank you for the lovely garden," Zyra said, nodding towards Casworth's remains. "You tended me well, but we need more sustenance to make the soil here more fertile." Hatterley saw visions of a world covered by a bouquet of colorful death. It was a beautiful riot of hues, soft and fluttering, choking cities. There were no graves, no war, no money. Hatterley was breathless. She didn't even feel the vines pull her down, nor the thorns buried themselves in her flesh, rending her skin, spilling her blood. "Step into the garden that ever grows," Zyra whispered through the stems and petals. "Death blossoms," and that's very good. "And you don't want to miss the colors, do you?" Hatterley did not respond, for she was with the flowers. Okay, here's where I have to admit I was a little unfair. The kraken lilies, the musk of the pearls of the moon, the sapphire roses, they do get brought up again. Like, he's planting them up here, literally planting them, in order to use them again down here. But I still maintain, like, just use, like, lilies and, like, just flowers. You don't need to invent an entire ecosystem of magic special flowers from the League of Legends world. You can just say smells of roses, smells of, you know, lilies and tulips and whatever. Because you don't get... Because those things mean things. Like, roses especially have meaning to us here in the human world. They have specific connotations of romance. The same thing goes for tulips. The same thing goes for lilies. There's a whole language of flowers that you can draw on in order to lend more meaning to the idea that the scent of roses kills her, for example. Ugh, almost sneezed there. And that's where, again... But the problem is these terms are empty. They don't mean anything. Kraken lilies don't mean anything. Pearls... Like, they're literally lilies. Just say lilies. Just... or just say, I don't know, bilgewater lilies. Or like, if you absolutely must. It's just this bit... The invention of names that don't have content still bothers me. But to be fair to him, he's planting them up there in order to... in order to pay them off down here, which is good writing craft. It's my specific complaint about too much specific terminology in the League of Legends universe that keeps shining through as one of my biases. Anyway, this is a very good way to establish who and what Zyra is. Like I said earlier, Zyra has always had that problem, is that he's like, not really, what does she want? Why does she want it? Like, what's her deal? What's she trying to do? What is it that she wishes to accomplish? What is it that she does in the world? What kind of story is she telling? What kind of theme is she telling? And where a character like Poison Ivy represents ultimately a very human perspective on the environmentalism. In most of her incarnations, she's essentially an eco-terrorist, right? She's someone who has an ideological, like a deep emotional connection to plant life, but also an ideological opposition to the ways in which humans treat nature. Zyra here is being made different in that she's not like a vengeful botanical wizard trying to, you know, grab revenge for the suffering of the plants and flowers. She is a plant. She is a flower. She is the mindset of plants, of predatory plants, of choking vines, put into a human context, put into a human body. She's that brain that approach to existence, which is choke out all other life, absorb all possible nutrients, spread yourself over every surface that your roots can find purchase on, spread yourself, become more, become ever present everywhere, absorb every ecosystem, eat every corpse, right? That mindset transplanted into Zyra, and then we get a real explanation of why Zyra is scary as hell, because she's that mindset combined with the capacity to make it real that comes from being humanoid, from having a human-like intelligence, from having magical powers. Which is a much better characterization of the character. I don't know if this is going to serve essentially as Zyra's new origin story. It's not clear to me whether Zyra didn't exist before this, and then the bud being, watered with blood was what actually brought her into the world, or if she existed before this, and she used that flower bud as a way to travel, as a way to... I'm hiccuping, I don't know why. As a way to spread herself across the world, as a way to find new victims and new nutrients and to reach new parts of the world. That's not really clear to me, whether that's going to be her new origin story, and I'd be curious to know, because, her bio, I believe, is still... Yeah, it's still the same as it has been. So I'm kind of curious about that, and I really do want to see more stories including Zyra, more stories about her, more stories about other champions encountering Zyra. In general, I want to see more stories about champion interaction, but fortunately for us all, that's exactly what Riot has provided in some of the other lore updates that they've been doing recently, and we might take a look at those in a future video. But for the moment, I have to say, thank you for indulging me in my return to talking about League of Legends lore. It's been nice to come back, especially to something that's quite as good as this. There's a link to the full story down in the description as usual. And if you've enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, share, bell icon, and other icons. Just click all the things. Just click on all of the things that you can click on and tell the YouTube algorithm to please not strangle my channel to death like Zyra would strangle you to death if she was in the room with you right now. Thank you. And also, if you want to, I have a Patreon that supports all of this nonsense and lets me sit around talking excitedly over an image of text on the screen for a very long time indeed. If you want to help me do that, well, Patreon is an option. You can also do direct donations through some of the links in the description, which also would be very helpful. If you're willing and able to do that, I would be grateful to receive the help. If you're not willing to do that, or if you can't, well, welcome to the club, my friend. It's tough all over. And I'm just glad that you've watched the video this far. Good lord, I haven't been used to talking, without end for this long. I've been editing all my videos recently, so... I think I'm overstretching some kind of talking muscle. Anyway, if you haven't enjoyed this video, I kept forgetting that part of the video. If you haven't enjoyed this video, well, there's a dislike button down below that you can click in order to let YouTube know that you haven't enjoyed this video. I should warn you, though, that that little dislike button, there's been some strange, it's been sprouting leaves recently. It open up little leaves, and it's they're kind of following you with their eyes, and they're looking at you, and then when you click it, they disappear, and you don't see them. But I don't know. It's been smelling of pollen in my room recently, and I don't know why. So just, if you click the dislike button and you suddenly, you start smelling flowers or something, just let me know, because I'm not sure if it's a bug with my computer or if it's a system-wide problem. And if you start finding, vines and tendrils and stuff stuck in your computer fans and stuff like that, you might want to contact YouTube about that. I don't know how a bug like that happens, but it's been a real problem. In fact, they're kind of spreading all over the floor right now. I should probably cut them or something. Thank you very much for watching.